for joining us. Sorry for the little mishap. But we just appreciate you being patient with us. We'll get this kick this off now. So thanks everybody for joining us for this NCLUG Tech Talk today with NCDOT on ORD implementation update. But before we get started, just going to run through our quick little spill of housekeepings. This is a webinar presentation, and so we're going to mute everybody. But if any time you have any questions, you could type them in the chat, and hopefully we could get to those at the end of the session. And as time allows, we'll address as many questions as we can. We will be recording this webinar and sharing the link after the event. So if you missed anything, you can come back and watch it. And then we are offering PDH credits to those who've registered for this live event. And then we'll be sending those out in the coming weeks. I think we're a little bit behind on some of the PDH credits, but we'll be following up with those soon. So now I'm going to just hand it over to Jeff Garland, who's going to do our presentation today from NCDOT. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us and being patient. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Patty, and certainly thank you, Brian. Generally appreciate the opportunity to speak with NCLUG. Certainly the NCDOT has been on a mission to move to ORD, and it's been quite the journey, and we're still on it. So there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things to discuss, but I certainly appreciate everyone's time today, and I look forward to speaking with you. Quick rundown of basically what we're looking to talk about today is just gonna I'm gonna introduce, there's a couple folks on the panel that I'm gonna have help with questions and do some of the presentation today. I'll give just a short background just as a refresher. I know the majority of the industry is fully aware of what's going on, but just wanted to kind of do a quick rehash on what that is, what the ORD implementation initiative is for the department, and then just talk about our team approach, because it truly is a department-wide, industry-wide collaborative approach to really make this shift to using ORD rather than MicroStation V8i moving forward for our design. So there's a lot of pieces there, so it's truly a team approach, and we'll talk about that. I'll talk about moving forward, some of the current plans, some of the test and pilot projects and the opportunities there. We'll discuss some of the training components and what we're working on as a department to provide to the industry. And then we'll talk through a number of current challenges and technical implications that we're working through day in and day out. Again, collaborative team environment, but we are overcoming a lot of pieces. When you make a change this big, it's to be expected, but we are actively working through that. And my hope is to wrap up certainly in time for a good, hopefully like 10 or 15 minutes for a good Q&A at the end, because I really and genuinely am looking for input from the industry. We only know what we know, and so when we get input from others, it helps paint a fuller picture and helps us address some of those concerns and issues by the industry on how we can help everyone along the path to the benefit of our taxpayers here in North Carolina. So really looking forward to speaking with everyone. And if it's not part of this presentation, please feel free to reach out to me via email or other communication methods to follow up with ideas, thoughts, concerns outside of this presentation. So as I mentioned on the panel today, which we're going to have towards the end, I have a couple folks from DOT, a couple of folks from NCDIT, and Bentley associated. But we have Jason, Oak, and Vaseem from the DOT that have been very instrumental working on this initiative. And from DIT, we have Kyle Nauman, who's also been very instrumental from the CAD services side on helping a lot of the software. And then from Bentley, we have Ethan Schwartz joining us, and he is serving as our dedicated NCDOT Bentley ORD expert advisor. So he's in the trenches with us, and certainly appreciate their help. I'll tee up a few of these folks for some of the presentation components, but we'll also have them on the end for a good open dialogue for questions and answers at the end. So again, quick background. Obviously, most of you know all of this, but we do continue to utilize Bentley software for our design tools here in North Carolina. Bentley is scheduled and is discontinuing the support for its legacy software, including SS2, still licensing for it, and we're looking into the implications of continuing licensing for SS2 and SS4 of the next short term, but trying to figure out what that means for the industry and what it means for the department. As we make this transition, we're trying to give every opportunity for our groups to be as successful as possible. So we're looking at those options. The ORD is replacing MicroStation, as we noted, and it really is that next generation of our technology platform, which I'll talk more about here in a minute. But it really is a true statewide technology-focused initiative. There's lots of folks involved. At the end of the day, like I said, it's such a big transition, and it truly is a paradigm shift. And we've used that term several times over the last year. That's going to require a lot of training, a lot of testing, and it's well underway, but we still have a ways to go as well. So why is ORD a paradigm shift? As most of you know, and I've shared this slide, Jason Moore helped me with this slide when I first came on board back to the department in January. But long story short, it really is a big change. Kind of like when we went from hand drafted to CAD. This is the big change from our current two-dimensional design where we generate our traditional plan, profile, cross sections, and then kind of the incidental was the model. And now we really are moving towards using both 2D and 3D design workflows, which we're developing as we go, to truly generate a model. And then from that model, we can look at producing sheets as an incidental. And the thought and the academic side of this is those plan and profile sheets will match the model very, very closely because they're generated from it. It's not an incidental like above in the 2D process where it's kind of an afterthought, and trying to build that model from the plan and profile cross-section sheets has been challenging, and there's been some issues there with trying to match that up with what construction is doing versus design. But really, at the end of the day, that big paradigm shift is we are moving to having all the intelligence within the graphical elements, and that the fact that we'll move away from GeoPack. And so like these are some implications that the department's dealing with now as far as this paradigm shift moving to ORD. And why are we doing it? Just a quick rundown on that. There's a lot of benefits anticipated and expected on what we're looking to do. But at the end of the day, I'll just jump right to the bottom line. For our DOTs, our agencies, our citizens, for those precious taxpayer dollars which we have to use to maintain all our roadway systems, all our bridges, everything we need to do from a state, the quicker we can identify things in the design process, through the concept and scoping, the preliminary design, and that front end design, that's where those cost savings are in that chart. Is we get to the back end, and certainly in construction, when we're hitting stuff and making design changes while we're in the field, that is where it's very, very expensive for the department. So we have a lot of cost savings by catching up early, and we're hoping the efficiencies in using 3D design and working within ORD will do just that. And then, like I mentioned on the back end, the model that we're trying to get to is essentially like a one model, one source of the truth, so that we can get to a point with AGC and the construction side of the house through our design, is that we can use this model for all their automated machine grading, automated machine guidance, and how it really assists them in improving construction efficiencies, quality. It saves a tremendous amount of money on the back end if we can work and trust from the same model. And so that's what we're working towards also, is kind of the back end of that goal of using ORD. So again, as I mentioned, it's been a journey. The department's been working on this for a while. I think we first became aware of this approximately 2016, started going through some of the original workspace ideas, trying to understand how and what the changes are with the new Connect platform and what that would mean as far as moving to OpenRoads Designer software. For several years, we went through kind of an understanding, planning, testing, training, getting to a point where I came on board again in January of 2020. And then, of course, we had the pandemic hit March of 2020. And here we are about a year and a half later, and I cannot believe it's May. I mentioned this earlier to Patty and Brian. But 2021 is going to be a really big implementation year for the department. Certainly, this is going to bleed over into 2022, as I have on the slide. But what I'm trying to communicate to our construction industry and our AGC partners and everything is, we move down this path, one of our hopes is that we start anticipating maybe piloting an actual delivery of a model as the deliverable of our design, rather than our traditional 2D flat black and white PDF type plans. Maybe the next handful of years. We are certainly not there today, but we are working towards what that could look like. There are some other states that are starting to pilot, basically generating a model as the deliverable. And we had a recent FHWA peer review of several states that are on different parts of this journey. And it's promising to hear all the work that's being done, but it's also a reality check and all the challenges that lie within that. I do see that as the industry we're headed over the next decade, several decades, to get to that true digital delivery, that digital twin type modeling from really concept to maintenance in the field and all the positive implications that can bring. But that's a lot of change, and that's a lot of work by a lot of folks. So we're getting there, but we are well down the path. And this year is going to be, and I'll talk more about the plan for implementation this year in just a bit. All that aside, I'll just pause for a minute and recognize our team approach. Obviously, when I took this role in January of last year, I had the fortunate opportunity that this was already well underway. There's been several people that have been carrying the torch for years, and we have a really sizable internal working group that includes a lot of CAD coordinators and the users, a lot of people to really help drive this home as a department. And these working group folks, they work on all the true technical pieces as far as understanding what it means for their units, for their divisions, for their specific disciplines. And it truly is a department-wide instance at this point. Everyone's familiar with the term ORD and has seen it and is working within it. But as we continue to uncover all the steps and the changes that are included, we have a lot more work to do. But we are approaching that in a very diligent, very studious manner, week in and week out. In addition, we have Bentley on board this year. That third and final bullet there is basically we do have a team of dedicated Bentley technical staff that we have working with us now. One of the gentlemen's names is Ethan Schwartz, who I'm going to hopefully have speak here later during this presentation. And Elizabeth Lee is the other counterpart. And she's really focused on the project-wise piece of this implementation, because concurrently between the ORD implementation and the utilization of project-wise and a managed workspace type instance is truly where the department's heading and truly what we're practicing and testing now. So this summer, this fall, as we continue to test and pilot projects, the interoperability between ORD, project-wise, how we use it all is very key. So the department has made an investment in pulling in some really key expert advisors from Bentley to help us down that path this year. So we're very appreciative of their help. And I apologize in advance to them for working them to the bone, because we have a lot of work to do and they're there in the trenches with us. Just to say it very clearly, we are on the current Connect ORD 2020 R3 version of Bentley, which is the 10.09 release, and we are working through that as best we can. I'll talk about some of the testing and training on that as well. We're also obviously working within OpenBridge Designer, OpenBridge Modeler, OpenRail, and we're looking into potential of using OpenGround on the geotech side, and obviously the other pieces within Bentley that we continue to test and work on. So getting to the plan and kind of where we're at, this summer and targeting July is when we're really looking to cut over new design projects from our photogrammetry, location surveys, other units to really try and use ORD for that base mapping type work for new projects coming out of the pipe. There's asterisks, there's going to be exceptions. We're doing the best we can to get towards that. It was a pretty aggressive date early this spring, but July is when we're trying to target any new design work for the NCDOT to try to get out of the gate using ORD, knowing that this transition is happening. We're also looking to test and pilot a number of projects, and for nomenclature, I'm using the term test projects for non-production. So either existing projects or other ways for us to test the software, but then we're also looking to pilot a certain number of projects, and we have a few of those out of the gate now that are truly using ORD for production purposes to generate the plans to let. So that is coming down the pipe as well. That will transpire all year long through certainly the fall and winter of 2021. And then, as I noted, some of the targets for a phase 3 later in 2022, 2023 is to really fine tune, hopefully these, figure out the rest of our migration from SS2, SS4 and basically turning those over into ORD, and what that may mean as far as generating a model for delivery. But so we're well on the implementation path, and we're calling it somewhat of a soft rollout. And as I mentioned, for those test and pilot projects, we currently have about 20 test projects where we're at different parts of the department are testing out the software using either older or existing projects side by side to really test it out, but again, in a non-production basis. But then we do have about 5 or so true pilot projects where different firms and the divisions are helping us out and using ORD for their production purposes to generate plans later this year. So this is all underway, and it's a collaborative process where we're learning from each other. One of the challenges we're going to have is that we do anticipate a 2021 R1 release. Well, it won't be R1 anymore because we're already in, well, it will be release 1, but it'll be, we thought it was going to be Q2. According to Bentley, it may be before June 30th, but we may roll that into later this summer. But we do expect sometime this year that first release from ORD for 2021, which will be the 10.10 version, and we'll have to determine the best way to incorporate that into our plans, but that is coming down the pipe. For that internal testing that I mentioned, we've had several projects where we're using the software to identify kind of clash detection. This one's just a kind of a simple example of some of the high mass lighting poles that we're able to identify and work within a test project and really see what that looks like in ORD to look at some of those early indicators. I mentioned the soft rollout, some of these pilot project opportunities, which we have several underway now. We really are going to start looking at all the existing projects coming off the shelf, if you will, because as we all know, there's a large number of projects being put back into play because of the current budget, and we have monies to turn projects back on, and a lot of the design work is underway, and we're trying to understand the best way to convert to ORD, or do we finish up in SS2, SS4, our current microstation way to do it? It's a challenge because, again, we're really going to take it by project assessment here over the short term, over the next 6 months to a year, because we want to do what's right for the state and what's right for our taxpayers. And we're trying to figure out all the implications that means. But if you do have a design project underway, it's in the kind of the earlier phases, and I would highly suggest coordinating with your project manager through the department, or even reach out to myself, and we can talk about options. It may be a good candidate to convert over to ORD and finish up using ORD as a pilot project, or it may not, based on schedule or complexities, but we can figure that out. But we have a lot of those determinations going on right now as we speak, and that's one of our big challenges I speak today. Training is the other big one. We're really trying to get everyone up to speed on how to use the software, the best ways to use it. Obviously, the live classroom sessions have been pretty much non-existent after the pandemic last March, but we are working on a number of different ways, and we're currently developing training on a number of different fronts to really help out our staff and also provide training opportunities for our external partners in the industry on how we foresee using ORD for our design purposes. We really are trying to do it at multiple levels along the units and division, and also, as I mentioned, external training. In addition to what's out there from Bentley, we're trying to specify learning paths within the Bentley training sites, and then also develop our own NCDOT specific ones as well. And with that said, we do have Jason Moore on the call today, and Jason has been instrumental in carrying that torch over the last several years and moving to ORD. So appreciative of all his efforts. But I'm going to turn it over to Jason for just maybe about 5-10 minutes here, Jason, to talk about some of the upcoming training modules that the department is developing and what they may look like and when they may be available. But with that, Jason, you can certainly take over the screen if you'd like.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great, Jason.
Okay, cool. I'm using an untested headset here. Let me share my screen. So basically what we've got going on in the roadway design unit is training development. No surprise there. I should probably move this over. Probably start at the beginning like you did, Jeff, which would be, I hope everyone's familiar with this page. This is Roadway Designs Connect page. And if you went to technical resources, Hopefully this won't take but a second. There we go. And under training files and training, you would find the first 3 classes that Oak submitted, that Oak provided for us for a couple of years ago, the ORD Quick Start, the ORD Civil Geometry, and ORD Templates. I'm sure everyone on this call has probably already been through these, and if you haven't, please do. That's a great place to start with ORD if you're a roadway designer. The things in these classes are still valid. They still hold pass muster, and they give you a good broad spectrum taste of ORD, and that was the purpose of these classes, to kind of present ORD comprehensively by covering them in several topics. The training we're developing now is basically taking each one of those topics and expanding them into their own module, taking a deeper dive into each one. So this is where I will switch over to ProjectWise. I hope that's not too small for everyone's monitor. I think I can do a little thing here to bump up the size. Okay, there we go. Is that coming through?
Yes, you can see it very
Okay for
clearly.
everyone, very clearly. All right. So that's the modules that we're working on right now. And you can see each one of them. Module 1, we're going to touch on file management. That's everything you need to do before you even open a CAD file to begin any kind of CAD work. We're going to touch on our naming conventions, workspace setup, a little bit of working with ProjectWise will be in there. All the licenses and accesses that you'll need to gain access to those systems. That's kind of just to get you started module. Then after that, we touch on module 2, an existing terrain model. That's something, if you're in DOT, that's primarily handled by location and surveys and photogrammetry. But at times, we will have to be making some existing terrain model in those early preliminary functional stages I think everyone's familiar with. Before you're given any kind of survey information, you have to kind of make your own. So we've got a module to address that. We of course have 3 and 4, developing horizontal and vertical alignments. And I probably should mention here that when you see horizontal alignments, you probably think strictly roadway design. Well, the thing about ORD is it's not necessarily just falls in that discipline. So like if, let's say you're a hydraulic designer and you need to do a T-line for a creek, well, the tools used for horizontal alignment for road, it's the exact same tools you'd use to develop that T-line. So these modules will have applicability beyond just the roadway design discipline. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So horizontal, vertical, I probably should be giving you the percentage of where we're at on these. So the first module, file management, that is just about done. We're probably about an 80-90% mark on that. The existing terrain module, that one is complete, 100% done on that. Horizontal alignment, we're probably about halfway done on that one. Vertical alignment, we haven't started on that one yet. Then we get into modeling, initial corridor modeling, and we're kind of touching on modeling, thinking of it in 3 different phases: initial corridor modeling, intermediate modeling, and detailed modeling. And the way I think about those, the difference in those 3, initial corridor modeling is kind of that broadsword approach where you're picking a template, you're applying it to your alignments, and you're winding up getting about 90% of your project's modeling done just by pulling a template through the project. Intermediate corridor modeling is where you have to go back and connect the corridors, say of your main line and your Y lines, do some of those turning radii, those fillet, and doing some of your edge treatments. Maybe you're putting in pocket lanes, maybe you're doing some widening from a 2-lane out to a 4-lane or 5-lane. So it's kind of a longitudinal thinking there for that intermediate corridor modeling. And then detail modeling, which I skipped a few, but I'll come back to it. In module 9, detail modeling is when you really put that minutia in there. You know, this is where you get into maybe some raised islands if you got those in the median, the pork chop islands we do. We haven't really decided where we're going to put bulbs at. That could fall into intermediate or the detailed modeling. Probably more for intermediate because those will have to be represented. They change the footprint. But detailed modeling is going to get into that. The question with detailed modeling gets in, is it worth your time, money, and effort to do that part? And we're still kind of sneaking up on answering some of those questions. I'll go back up to Module 5, Initial Corridor Modeling. I spoke on that. Module 5, we'll be getting into plan geometry. Haven't started on that one yet. Module 7, super elevation, we're just cracking into. We're about 30% done on it. Intermediate corridor modeling, we're in the early stages of that, and it's kind of mixed in with the other modeling aspects. Detailed modeling, we haven't started on that one. Intersection modeling, you see that listed as a 9.1. We thought that would probably be a separate module, but the way it's working out, we might just incorporate intersection design aspects into the other modeling modules. So that may not be its own standalone module. Module 10, interchange design, you see a TBD to be determined there. We don't think we're going to get to that one because there's so much other work in these other modules, but we had it slated. It is one that will be pending eventually. Module 11, sheeting, is one that we haven't quite started on yet. And Module 12, also TBD, ORD hearing map production. We will be addressing how to make hearing maps in ORD. And you see there at the bottom also a test script. Robert Garrett from Vaughn and Melton has created a test script to help us evaluate the integrity of our workspace whenever there's a new version of ORD released. We think this is something that's going to be really beneficial to kind of check things out whenever Bentley updates the software to make sure our workspaces for something that was previously working still works in the new version of the software. Let me see if I can get off of this now. And this is all stored in ProjectWise right now. This is kind of our working area. When we get these published, they will be published to the Roadway Design website. There'll be a written document and there'll be some companion videos supplied that'll take you through the exercise. And to kind of give you a quick visual of what these things are going to look like, this is just one of them. This is Module 2, the existing terrain module, and they're all kind of formatted the same. You'll see as you scroll down through one of these, we always begin with the ribbon showing you where the tools are located. You get farther down and we explain what the tools are, what their function is, what you can do with them. And then if you were to get farther down into the document, we should start seeing some screenshots appear. There we go. And this is where we're actually take you through some exercises in using the tools. I know I didn't really teach anything about ORD here. It was kind of not the purpose of this presentation, but to kind of show everyone what training we're working on and that it is coming. The plan is to start rolling these out in July. And I guess we're going to save questions for the end, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll do questions, but thank you so much, Jason. That's
okay.
Absolutely fantastic. And to Jason's point, we are actively looking to have this training available for the industry, hopefully starting this summer, coinciding with when some of these design and these pilot projects would take place. So that is certainly the case. And I believe my screen is back up. I think we're back in. Yep, good. And again, thank you so much, Jason. So really moving from there after the training piece, we've got to figure out a couple different things. One, we're still looking at the software readiness overall and some of the enhancement needs. So in addition to testing this out and training this, and again, this is on the current 2020 R3, the 10.09 version of the software. So as we identify these things in the training work, in the test projects, and even some of the pilot projects, we are continually going back and forth with Bentley, trying to make sure that we bring up issues as we find them and make sure that the software is ready. And there are some challenges there, but we are working through them in a collaborative nature with Bentley as we speak. In addition, we're really trying to understand the workflow changes because there's a lot of changes that are coming out from understanding how we could use ORD more efficiently and how we could do the modeling. every unit's different, every discipline's different, but as we go through these, we're starting to map these out. And Vaseem, who's on the call as well, he's been very instrumental working with a number of the units and divisions across NCDOT to really start mapping this out. We will continue to morph and change these workflows as we learn more, but I really just want to stress how appreciative I am of the team effort to really get this done, because we're all figuring this out together, and we're learning from the industry, and the industry's learning from us. But it really is going to be for the benefit of all our tax-paying citizens here in North Carolina to do just that. So I'm looking forward to that win-win. And one of the big challenges around this, as I mentioned earlier, is what are some of the technical impacts of converting projects from SS2, SS4 to ORD? When would we do it? When does it make sense? Because again, we're in a transition period here where we want to maximize our use of work that's already been done. And so just as a general policy to point out, we really are trying to minimize the need for these conversions if at all possible. I mean, if a project's essentially fully designed, we're at the tail end of this thing, let's just wrap it up. If it's something that's already underway and it's a complex one, or there's just a tight schedule, and we'll probably continue to use SS2, SS4. But again, we're just trying to find those right opportunities on when to convert and which projects over the short term. Eventually, SS2 and SS4 licensing, as that goes away and we figure that out in the years to come, I don't know, I feel like it's going to be around certainly next year, 2023. We want to certainly maximize the work we have, because there are a large number of DOT projects out there that have been out of the gate using this software. And so if we pull them on the shelf, it basically all the way designed, would it make sense just go and let them using that software just to go ahead and generate the plans, or do we convert it? And these are questions we're dealing with on a regular basis. But I do have Ethan Schwartz on, and I'd like to introduce him for a minute and let him speak for a few moments around some of our current ideas on the conversion process and when. But Ethan, I've got the slides up here if you want to take over. But again, Ethan is a Bentley employee, but he is certainly he is committed and working full-time for the NCDOT for this calendar year and potentially beyond to help us with this implementation. But with that said, I'm gonna put this first slide up here. And Ethan, are you able to see that? And do you have audio?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound great. Thank you, Ethan.
Sorry about the delay. We were in another meeting for a little while there. Like Jeff said, and actually like Jason said, we're working together as a team. We're trying to come up with how do we take what you've got now and make it work in what's coming. So I'm working with Vaseem and Oak and several people within NCDOT to come up with a plan for what do we do with older projects that need to come forward. We've got a basic flow diagram. There are several factors that we're going to look at with each project. It's going to have to be a project by project assessment, though, just because projects are so different, and you guys all understand that. The first thing we're going to look at is what stage is the project in. If you're just getting started, we're going to start you off in ORD rather than trying something, trying to convert later on. As the project moves forward, we're going to look at one of the big factors is, has hydraulics been completed? If the hydraulic design has been completed, it doesn't make sense to redo that work, so we're going to carry it forward. If it hasn't been completed, we're going to start it off in ORD. Beyond that, if the hydraulics are done, what stage are the plans in? How complex is the project? These are more questions that we're going to have to ask to see just how much we're going to have to bring over and in which software we're going to use it. If we go on to the next slide, we've got 3 different conversion sets that we're looking at right now. A minimal conversion, a moderate conversion, and a full conversion. And going back to the flow diagram, it would, depending on how things work out here, depending on which box things end up in, they'll end up, and if we go forward, sorry, we'll carry it to this flow diagram, and we'll look at what needs to be brought over if we are converting it. So in a minimal conversion, This would be your smaller projects that haven't quite got started yet. You're going to have to bring forward the horizontal and vertical alignments if they've already been created. We're going to have to convert any kind of TIN files that have been created into ORD terrain models. And really from there, the rest of the plans we can open in ORD, and you'll just use the regular MicroStation drafting tools to kind of finish off these projects, get them off the table. We're not looking to do any real ORD design on any of the minimal projects. Really, we just want to finish them off and get them done and out. That brings us to the moderate conversion. This is going to be your more complex designs. This is going to be things like interchanges for interstates, roundabouts, anything that you've had to put a lot of detail into that you're not going to want to have to redo. Then we're going to have to look at a moderate conversion. Again, you'll bring all of your alignments, horizontal and vertical, forward, and I know I'm kind of speeding through this now. We're going to have a process that we're working on setting up. We'll write it out, we'll detail it. Exactly how do you bring these alignments forward? What's that going to look like? What information comes with it? That's why it says draft in the bottom corner. We're still working on getting the details. We will publish that when we get it done. But if you're doing a moderate, all right, so you're going to have to bring forward your alignments. You're going to have to convert your TIN files over to terrain models. And that's where the similarities with minimal stop there. There's a whole bunch of files in SS2 that your model relies on that we don't necessarily use it the same way in ORD. So those are the additional files that we will have to look at converting. And this is a big task. It's going to be project by project, depending on what we need to bring forward. If your model's not finished, the IRD file is where your model resides. We're going to have to look at converting that file and bringing it forward so we can use it. We'll have to convert your template libraries. A big change from SS2 to ORD, some of you on the pilot projects might be noticing, is the line styles and cell annotation scales were off. So we'll have to change all of that coming forward. So there's a whole lot of information that we have to modify, or not necessarily modify, but we have to convert to be able to use in ORD. Again, we'll work on what that process is going to look like and what you guys have to do that. Get that all laid out for you. Hopefully there's not a lot of moderate conversion. This is the one that we'll have to look at cost of how long it's going to take to do it versus the benefits of converting everything over. Excuse my voice, I'm trying to get over a chest cold. That brings us to the full conversion. So if we go back, can you go back to the flow diagram just for a second? If a project is early on and you haven't started it yet, we're going to fully convert it over to ORD. If you're pulling a project off the shelf that's been sitting there for 4 years, and it's not something that you've got a ton of work already in, it's not something that's super complex. Let's go back to the 3. That would be a full conversion. And basically what we're going to do is, again, any alignments you've created, we can still make use of. We can convert those and bring them forward. But everything else, we're going to have to go back to location and survey and photogrammetry, and we're going to have them redo the base mapping, bring it all up to the correct annotation scale. We're going to have to, everything else from there then, once that's converted, we'll start it as a brand new ORD project. So a full conversion, there's not a whole lot to bring forward. We're going to make use more of the new standards, the new templates, the new element types, that all that setup that we've got now. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Let's scroll forward. So as we go through and we lay this out, we'll be making a document for conversion from SS2, SS4 over to ORD. And these are some of the things that we're still considering. This is still in the draft stage, so we're looking for input from people. if you've had experience with this and you want to make sure that certain things are covered, if you have concerns, let us know. As we go through this process, we will finalize things and get them into a full document, a full workflow for how to bring these projects forward. And it will include things like what phase your project is in, how you determine the complexity of what you've got. You know, I mentioned we're going to look at a project by project basis. What exactly are you going to look at? What exactly am I going to convert? Which files do I need to grab? In the short-term approach versus a long-term approach, we'll probably have to convert more projects in the short term because they have already been started. You don't want to have to redo a great deal of work. In the long-term approach, though, as you guys get used to ORD and you get more skill with it, you'll find a lot of these conversions are going to be more time-consuming than they're worth. And I'm not talking about the complex projects. But with these more simple projects, as you get used to ORD, you're going to find that it's a faster process just to restart. You know all of the new tools, you know all of the new templates, and you'll be used to the behavior at some point, and you'll expect how these are going to interact and work together. Instead of trying to pull forward all that information and struggle with that, in the long term, you guys are going to find it's easier to recreate some of the work you've already done. So those are the things we're looking at. Again, we're still in draft stage. Please, if you've got input, contact me, contact Wasim. We're happy to listen. We're happy to talk things over with you and work on this together to get a good conversion.
Perfect. No, thank you so much, Ethan, and I really appreciate all your commitment to the project already, and certainly been drinking from the fire hose, as they say, nonstop here. So certainly appreciate it. With that said, again, just the other caveat to that is we truly are looking at just trying to. These are guidelines. We're trying to figure out the best way to approach this. We are open for input, as Ethan noted, and we are really just trying to figure out what is the best scenario for each project. You know what I'm saying? As we try to deliver this for the public, should we go to ORD? Should we just finish it up in SS2, SS4? What is the best solution? And that's where we're really bringing in the project managers, the folks close to the work, the firms that may be hired to do the work, their comfort level, all these factors. What is the right path? But as we make this transition, this will be a question in the short term of the next 6 months, year, as we go through this implementation. But at some point down the road, again, it won't be a question anymore. We will use ORD for all our work. But in the short term, what is our conversion guideline? So this is our first stab at it. So thank you to Ethan and Wasim and team. I really appreciate it. So workspaces is one of the final things I want to bring up, and then we'll get to some Q&A here, just see if there's any thoughts from the industry. As we all know, we've been working on this workspace for a while now, and we're really trying to develop one that is truly out of the box as best as possible to incorporate a couple different things to the department. One, to create a flexible workspace for PEFs and the DOT so that you can have it in single or multidiscipline environments, give you that flexibility, but then also really to work along the lines with Bentley's new releases that come out of the pipe to try and minimize any rework, but also to give each of our disciplines and units that need it the flexibility to manage their space within the workspace as much as needed. Because again, we all have different unique ways we need to use ORD in the workspaces. So we're trying to accommodate all of that. And obviously Oak on the call has been very instrumental in pulling together our current workspace and the Connect platform. I think we're roughly on around the 7.x series of these at 7.2 or something like that. And we continue to tweak it, and we're continuing to look for input. It is out there for folks to download and utilize the workspace. We are looking for input, and we're continually working on those improvements. We do have some meetings set with Bentley later this week, and in the weeks ahead to really look at some checks and balances, some best practices made from other states. We're just trying to pull it all in for the benefit of our PEFs and our department to get out of the gate as best we can on these projects. But again, the workspace will continue to morph and change as needed as we move ahead, but just want to put that out there. to kind of really get close to wrapping up, I know we're coming up on the hour here shortly, and I do want to leave time for some questions potentially. All that aside, we really are trying to figure out the best multi-prong approach to communicating with a large industry. That's not just the engineering firms, the construction firms, it's also the municipalities with all the other design elements out there from all the different disciplines, whether that be in the location surveys realm, the utilities realm, within geotech, structures, hydro. There's so many areas and so many firms that are impacted by this. How do we all coordinate, collaborate together? So I'm always looking for input, and we're trying to figure out what we learn to go into the external work and then also to come back to us as well. I want it to be a circuitous type approach where it goes round and round and we help each other collaboratively. So just want to throw that out there that it will be an ongoing journey for a while here. With that said, I'm going to pause. I was shooting for about 12:50 and we're just a few minutes over that, so pretty good on time. But definitely want to leave at least 5-10 minutes here to put up the panel again, that we can all kind of maybe, I can certainly facilitate and help address some of these questions, but just want to thank all the industry out there for all the work that you've been doing to get your specific firm or area up to speed on ORD. I know that you guys are learning from not only North Carolina, but other states as well. We're trying to incorporate all those. And then just to recognize that this has been a tremendous push for the NCDOT and a lot of effort and a lot of folks that are really trying to figure this thing out. And Bentley, for their part, in trying to support this, and I know it's been a work in progress. Obviously, they're fine-tuning and developing the software as we go. And again, there are pros and cons to that, but we are trying to focus on the pros and really develop the software to truly meet our needs. So again, we welcome any of that input. But with that said, this is kind of the glance of the panel. I'll turn it over to Patty and Brian to maybe help facilitate here. But in general, if you have any thoughts, questions, there's an email address that's on this right here. I welcome you to email this. You can certainly reach out directly to me. We will help find a way to incorporate your questions, your answers. We'll take answers. How about that? Solutions with anything you can provide. But with that, thank you so much for your time today, and I'll turn it over to Patty and Brian to facilitate maybe a Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's great information to know, great update. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, you can type your questions in the chat box or use the raise your hand feature, and we'll take those. And Jeff, are you able to stay a little bit longer? I know we got started a little bit late. I mean, I think we're fine to run over a little bit. Anybody that wants to stick around.
Certainly, I can certainly stay on the line.
Okay.
Hey, Patty, I have a question real quick.
All right, go ahead.
What would be your guidance as divisions, as central for PDFs as they are getting questions about transitioning? What would be your guidance on who to contact or how to start that conversation of deciding whether or not it makes sense to do the certain steps or certain integrations? What would be your guidance on how to start that conversation?
And that's an excellent first question. And is it Ian? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you for that, Ian. The short answer is whoever your direct project manager is within NCDOT, whether that's a division project manager or someone from our project management unit that's basically the champion for that project within the department, I would bring that up directly to that project manager. And then what we've done is we've set up a lot of kind of just an exploratory type discussion where we'll set up like a 30-minute meeting or an hour to basically just to kind of see where the project's at, the comfort level of the firm and the project manager with ORD and where we're at, and bring in our other technical folks to help address how to get out of the gate using ORD and how to assess it. And we can make a pretty quick determination that says, yes, let's convert, let's move to ORD. This makes sense to do this as a pilot project this calendar year and go ahead and get out of the gate with that. Or we would determine that no, based on the certain factors and conditions we're looking at, just stay the course, finish it up in SS2, SS4, and we'll just run it that way. But I would start with your project manager would be my direct answer.
Yeah, Nicholas Speaks has a question. Nick, if you just want to unmute yourself, I'll just let you ask your question. Or your hand is raised.
Hello.
Hey.
Actually, Ian asked pretty much generally what the question I was going to ask, but at one point I had heard that, you know, for projects that were going to be created in ORD, that we were going to get like a representative from DOT to basically help us get through the initial project, the initial setup, and I think that's exactly what you just said, which is that, you know, if we get awarded a project that you want us to use an ORD in, that you're going to basically be directing us at that point.
And Nick, that's a great follow-up comment and question to that. And the short answer is yes. What we're doing with some of these pilot projects that we are going to use ORD for production purposes, most of these are division managed projects at this point. And when they've awarded these and the firms that are starting that work will have essentially like an ORD type orientation kickoff type thing to really figure out our best strategies for setting up project-wise, getting the project set up, get the workspace in line, everything that needs to do. And then as they hit some of the design milestones, and obviously we're at the beginning stages of this, to bring back in folks to help kind of facilitate some of the questions that are coming up. And they're good questions that are coming up, and we're calling it a piloting process because it is for a true project that we're going to design and generate the production plans, but it is also piloting because we're all kind of fine-tuning our processes both from the DOT side, and we're learning from the firms on some of their practices on how they think it should be done, and we're trying to consider all options. So we really have regular check-ins, and we're working very closely with the project managers in the divisions and certainly central as these roll out. So that's exactly it, Nick. We want to help provide guidance and learn together during this process.
That's fantastic. And then as a follow-up question, you know, what would you direct, you know, the different firms to do now as far as preparing for being awarded a pilot project? You know, right now, I think it's, you know, visiting the training modules that you guys have set up, and beginning training that you guys are going to provide. But is there anything else that we could be doing in preparation for being awarded a project at some point?
And I may start the addresses, but I may turn over to Oak and or Jason as well here in a second. But the other thing off the top of my head, Nick, would be to certainly explore taking that Connect workspace that we've developed, the 7.2 X series, and making sure that you have some familiarity with that, because that's our most up-to-date version of how we're trying to use ORD. But Jason and or Oak, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I was probably going to say the same thing as you. I would first point any firm to the Bentley Learn server. Mm-hmm. I mean, Oak, you were probably going to say that's where you gained your knowledge to start with. And basically the way I would say it is Bentley supplies, if anybody's ever had a can of paint mixed at Lowe's or Home Depot, you always start with a base, which is kind of a white color, and then you inject the colors into it to achieve the tint that you want. That's kind of how training works for this. Bentley has tons of training on ORD, the base operations for it. It's just here in our group with Oak, we give it the North Carolina tint. It's very close to most other states, but it is slightly different. So I would just say you can, from the Bentley Learn server, learn how to do a project in ORD just from those resources. But what we're doing in developing our training is to kind of give it that North Carolina flavor. What we found out over the last 3 or 4 years of development, and kind of the direction we're going to point in-house and firms to as to our preferred methods of operation, because ORD gives you a lot of different ways to do things. And we're hoping to not take anything away. You know, we want to let the designer be the designer, but what we have discovered and earned through trial and error is kind of what we're putting into this training, the development aspects of this is what we learned as probably we would recommend as the preferred method. And Oak, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I was saying the same along what Jason and Jeff was saying. It's just get familiar with our workspace, our limitation, what we can, and a lot of stuff we can do. There's some stuff we can't do. Just stay current with the what we can or can't do with the workspaces. I think that'd be a good start.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason.
Hey,
Thank
Jeff,
you, Oak.
just
Yeah.
one
Thank you very much.
final
Yeah.
follow-up. It kind of comes from there's been some seminars going on this week and last week. Oh, it was actually last week with 4 other states. I know Utah and Ohio was in there, and they've been talking about this transformation process a lot as well. And this is kind of a good forum to let everybody know, y'all, we're doing this together. Let's be patient. We don't have a lot of the processes figured out that we're gonna develop these as projects present issues that we didn't think of that needs to be addressed. So it's just going to take time, and it's going to take locking arms and doing this together.
Yep, agreed, Jason, and thank you for that point. And again, to that point, that's where the department's really trying to focus on investing in resources, including Ethan Schwartz on the call now, and as far as others from Bentley, to really help us out of the gate on all these projects, because we are going to uncover processes, programmatic changes, what we need to do while we're in motion on some of these projects, and how do we document it, how do we share that knowledge, and how do we figure out the best solution for the department moving forward from all sides. So that is certainly on the radar.
All right. Well, thank y'all so much. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap this up today? We do appreciate everybody's time today. And hopefully, you know, Jeff, in the upcoming months and stuff, we can do some more training and get people more up to date using NCLUG as everybody kind of really starts getting into working on projects. So
That
we really
is,
appreciate the update.
yeah, that is certainly the target, Patty, and just want to thank NCLUG again for putting this on. It's always great to have a connection back with the industry and working within it. And again, we welcome any comments and input as you think of them. Thank you, Patty.
And as always, I mean, NCLUG, we're a local user group. So if anybody has any suggestions of things that they want to see, some more detail on any specific thing, you know, please email us any of your comments or suggestions, and we'll definitely take a look at that and trying to do some presentations on some of the material you're most interested in knowing about. So we do appreciate that. Okay, well, thank y'all very much for coming today, and we'll be holding more NCLUG in the future, and so we just appreciate that, and so be on the lookout for more invites. Thank y'all so much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.